Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and welcome to today's online class. Today, let's start looking at Scratch coding. You are probably familiar with STEM and maybe STEAM. STEM is a focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. STEAM is the same thing, just adding in art. One part of this focus, either STEM or STEAM, in education is programming or coding or robotics, and also object-oriented programming. We're going to take a look at Scratch programming to introduce us into this part of STEM or STEAM. As a teacher with good technological knowledge like you have, you may be approached by a school or a school district to lead a STEM team in your school. Now, don't be nervous about the word programming or programming environment. Scratch is really easy. It's designed for many ages of students and can be used all the way up through adults. Scratch is a free programming coding environment that runs in a web browser. It was designed by MIT Media Lab's Lifelong Kindergarten Group. Scratch users can create programs or coding by simply snapping together blocks of code in the Scratch editor. If you like Legos, then this is for you. It's just as easy as working with Legos, and just as much fun, if not more. Scratch is easy to work with. There's no software to install. It's absolutely free, and they intend to always keep it free. There are no ads. There are no in-app purchases. There's no pro version. You can use it online, which most people do. You can also download a copy of this editing software to your machine. And you simply use the mouse to drag and drop blocks of code. So very, very little typing is even needed. Scratch represents object-oriented coding. So to code an object, we have to see what types of objects are available in Scratch. The most basic object is a sprite, and a sprite is an avatar or a character. Sprites appear on the stage, and blocks of code control what they're going to do, what kind of behavior they're going to have. The editor automatically starts you with a sprite that's a cat, but you can change that sprite, you can add other sprites. And there are a whole host of a variety of sprites available. We program or code a sprite by adding code blocks in the scripting area, which is in the middle of the screen. In Scratch, a stack of code blocks is known as a script. Now let's take a look at that. When you're ready, pause this video and navigate to the Scratch site. It's scratch.mit.edu. And then I'm going to start by talking about the interface, and then I'll do a live demo of it. When you enter Scratch, notice that on the right-hand side is the stage. And in this image, you can see the stage with a backdrop that looks like a city. You can also see two sprites. On the far left-hand side, you'll see those dots going down vertically, and those are categories of coding blocks. If you click on any of those categories, you'll then see the coding blocks, which are right next to them. You'll see these coding blocks appear. Notice how they look like Lego blocks in the sense that they lock together. Next to the coding block area is the coding area in this open area that looks like a word processing type of environment. This is the space that we will drag and drop the coding blocks and hook them together. There are a number of categories of code blocks. Today, we're going to focus on the basic ones, the ones to get some of the primary activities going in Scratch. we're going to look at motion and looks and events and control. But when you look at the other code blocks, and we will enter into some of those as well in future classes, you'll notice that you can deal with sound and sensing, meaning that the avatars, the sprites, will be able to sense where they're at and what's around them. Operators, variables, those are more advanced pieces, and we'll touch on them a little bit. So, and then there are also other extensions that are available. So for the youngest of students, we can work with them at the most basic level, and they'll be very satisfied with what they're capable of doing in Scratch. And for students who are older, we can really get them into more advanced elements of coding. And what we do in this coding environment, students can also go on and transfer these skills into higher languages like C++. Now let me just introduce these concepts, and then I will run a live video demonstration. Under the stage, you can see tools to allow us to add a sprite and also to add a backdrop, which means a scenery. Now, in order to change sprites or scenery or work with any of these elements, you then have to drag out a coding block and click it to run. Before working with costumes or sprites or backdrops, you can select them first by clicking underneath the stage. When you select one of these items, you can then move over into the left-hand side of the screen and choose some of the other tools that are available. Younger students really enjoy some of the details. For example, they may want to change the outfit that this particular sprite is wearing, and they can really enjoy. That'll be like the game aspect of Scratch for them. So I just navigated to Scratch. You can join Scratch up here in the upper right, and then you could later sign back in. And if you do that, your work will be saved right to Scratch itself. So here's a join link as well, and here it says on the left-hand side, start creating. I'm going to just dive right in and start creating. Take a moment to load in, and here it is. Here's a nice video. You can play that to see how this works. It's only about a 30-second video. I'm going to close that for now, and let's walk through some of the basics. So here you can see the stage on the right-hand side, and there's one sprite already here. On the left-hand side, here we have motion and looks and sound. And if you notice, by clicking on these are simply shortcuts that are navigating you through this long list of coding blocks. This is the coding window area in the middle. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little picture of the sprite who is going to, or whatever character or whatever object is going to be coded at that time. So let me go over here to the right-hand side. Let me add another sprite. I can search for a sprite, and I can take the time to go through all these different categories. They have a wonderful array of different sprites, different categories of sprites. Notice when I'm rolling over Abby, Abby has different motions available to her. I'm going to click on Abby. So now I've got Abby on the stage, and I can move her. Notice when I've clicked on her, either on the stage or down here in this area, Abby now appears in the upper right-hand corner of the coding window. If I click on the cat sprite, now the cat appears in the upper right-hand portion of the coding window. It's very important to notice that, because whatever character is here, remember this is object-oriented coding, we are going to, any code that appears here is going to be appropriate to this sprite or whatever is here. Let's go down and let's play with, since I'm here with Abby, let me go up to the upper left-hand side. Notice there's a tab for code. There's also one for costumes. Now, younger students tend to really enjoy this. By the way, here's some of the other activities that Abby, different poses that she can do. And here you can play with these different color tools, and you could change her outfit, and as it says, her costume. Also, every sprite will have a sound associated. So this is Abby's sound. If I click onto the cat sprite, there's the cat's meow. I'm going to go back to code because that's the default, that's the standard, the main place that you want to be. Now, let me go to the lower right-hand corner and let me find a backdrop. And again, tremendous array of backdrops here in a whole number of categories. So I think I'm going to start off and put a bedroom. Oh, look at that. The stage is now complete and filled in with the bedroom backdrop. Now I'm going to add one more backdrop. So we have more than one scene, if you will. Let me see. Let me go to space. I'm going to put these two characters on the moon. So here they are. Now, we'll show you the first bit of coding. And before I do that, let me just show you that you can move these characters around. So these sprites can be moved. And notice every time I click on a sprite, the sprite appears in the upper right-hand corner in the coding window. Let's say that I want to change the backdrop. Oops, I'm just going to add one there. Sorry about that, one mistake. I'm going to, here I have a backdrop for the stage. Now how do I change that backdrop? Here's your very first bit of coding. I'm going to click on it over here on the right-hand side, and notice everything here in the coding blocks, like the looks and the sound and so on, all have to do with the moon at this point. So I'm simply going to drag one of these out. Switch backdrop to moon. Now this is live. So I'm going to go in here and say switch the backdrop to the bedroom. And I'm going to click on it. And now you can see that Abby and the cat are in the bedroom. You can also see that this is live. Let me go to next backdrop. So this coding block now, every time that I click on it, will change the backdrop, and it will cycle through all of them, including the blank that I first started with. If I don't want to have this code here any longer, then I will simply drag it off to the left. But before I drag it off to the left, I'm going to pull one more piece in here just to show you how we would do this. Notice I can connect these up. So I'm going to say, go to this one and then do the next. And I'm going to point this out because when I'm here, notice I can separate these. I could drag one off. Now I'm going to go back to the moon. I also want to point out that in the upper right-hand corner, if I right-click up here, there's an undo. That's our Control-Z, if you will. I can add some comments so I know what I was intending to do with this coding. And I can also delete this if I choose. So right-click in the upper right-hand corner. I can also simply take this and drag it off to the left, and it goes away. Now I'll finish here by doing two things. I'm going to click on Abby, and notice that all of these pieces over here in the code area now have to do with the sprite Abby. Finally, in the upper right-hand corner, notice there's a full screen option. Because when this code runs, so this program basically that you're creating, it's going to be in the full screen mode. Also notice we're not using it just yet, but there's a green flag and a stop that's available. Let's consider some more. So now let's take a look at how easy it is to move a sprite. So begin by clicking on a sprite and then look over in the motion area, the blocks of code associated with motion. You can have the sprite move. So if you want to say move, you specify how many steps you want that character to move. Now realize steps are not like human-sized steps. They're going to be very very small increments. If you say glide, you don't have to count the number of steps, and you'll glide to a particular location. If you say move quickly to a position, then the character is just going to like, poop, there I am. It's going to appear very quickly. If you point out to glide or to move to a particular position, then you have to understand the coordinate system that's here. Now, you don't have to understand it very well because when I demo it, you could see you can simply move the character and you could take note of what the coordinates are. But realize there's the x and the y. So the x, like a typical chart or graph, x is the horizontal, y is the vertical. And on the left and on the bottom is the negative. So at the bottom we go from negative 180 to positive 180. From left to right, we're minus 240 to positive 240. And again, it's easy to do. You don't have to remember all of this. I'm just pointing out so you have the understanding of how it works. All you have to do is drag a sprite to a particular location on the stage and take a look at the coordinates. Up till now, we've been simply clicking on a block of code and it started to work for us. Now, when you complete a project in Scratch, you're not going to be clicking on the code. The user's not going to see the code. So instead, like any app or software that you've ever used, you need something to get this started, something to trigger it. We call that an event. So you can find the events area of the code, and you can find that three of the big ways to cause something to occur. You can click on the flag. So that green flag that I pointed out on the top of the stage area, you can click that and then something will happen. You can press a particular key, or you can say I'm going to click this sprite, and depending what you point out as the event, then the code that's underneath it, that's attached to it, will happen. So let's take a look at a live demo of that. So let's explore how you can make the sprites move. I click on a sprite, so I clicked on Abby, and when I look in the motion area, notice we have move, turn, various go-tos, and various glides, and a whole bunch of other things that are related. I'll start off with a couple. You can see they're intuitive as to what they're going to do and how they work, and then you can experiment with them if you're so inspired. Let me pull move out here. So if I say 10 steps, Abby's going to move, and we know that I can just click on it, and there she went 10 steps. Notice when we're talking about steps, we're talking more on the pixel level. It's not really human-sized steps. And I can always click in here, and I can change the number of steps. I can say Abby's going to move 20 steps. If I click on it, sure enough, there she goes. She's moved twice as far this time. Let me try the glide. So when I say glide, I can say glide for so long, so many seconds, to a particular place, or I can say to an XY coordinate, or just there are various things here. So I'm going to start off with this one. And notice this is a wide open piece here. I can just drag this anywhere I want. It's like a painting canvas. You can just drag it anywhere you want. So how long do you want Abby to take to get somewhere? I'm going to say 2 seconds. And when I look at the coordinates, how do I know where Abby is? Well, when I look over here, if I drag Abby around, and if I watch in this area right here, here's the XY coordinates. So if I start Abby here at minus 187 minus 15, so I wanted Abby to walk down the boardwalk to here. So 85 minus 18. So I can go in here and say 85. I can say minus 18. Now, to see Abby walk, or in this case glide, I'm going to have to move her back. It's taken her 2 seconds now to glide that distance. So you can see if I just set that to 3 seconds. Now if I click on it now, it's 3 seconds of no movement because she's already there. So I can move her back. If I click on it, sure enough, it's going to take her 3 seconds now to glide that same distance. And then So I could also say go to. So let me drag this down. And notice when I say go to, it has now recorded her current position. So when you drag these out, wherever that sprite is at the time, that position is already going to be recorded. So let me just move her back in this area. Let me say go to. Whoop, there she is. So she goes immediately, glide, she goes slowly, and if you want to count steps, then it'll be a different process. And you can also play with some of these other pieces about what direction she turns and so on. Now I could do the same thing for my cat. But if I wanted to do that with the cat, notice I click on the cat, reinforced up here. The cat is in the upper right-hand corner of this coding area, and there are no blocks of code here right now. So I'm just going to have one thing for the cat right now. I'm going to say the cat is going to move 10 steps. And I'll move the cat back here a little more. I'm going to move Abby back here a little more. All right. Notice when I click into Abby or the cat, the coding window changes. So always notice which character you're working with before you start dragging the coding out. All right, now let's look at one other thing. Let's add an event. So I'm going to click on Abby. I'm going to click into events. And all the events are yellow colored. So let me try the flag first. I'm going to say when the flag is clicked, Abby will move. I can say when a certain key is pressed. And they're suggesting right now spacebar. But notice all the keys you could possibly press are here. I'm going to leave the space for now. And let me do when the sprite is clicked. So these are starters, basically. And notice the shape of this. It's a beginning piece. So I can now click, I can hit the space, or I can click the sprite, press the space, or click the flag. So if I click the flag, she moved 10 steps. If I hit the space bar, I'm hitting it now. Now she's doing the glide. Now I have the same location for the other piece, so I'm going to just move her back here a little bit. And it says if the sprite is clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Abby, and oh, there she just plops over there. I'm going to move her back, and let me just show that we can go to the full screen if we wanted to. Because this is how it will look in the final version. So in the final version, you'll have access to clicking the flag. You'll have access to clicking the sprite. Now, when the program is actually running, I can't pick her up and move her. I would have access to pressing the space bar, but you didn't see anything because she's already in that location. So that's how easy it is to create motion. And realize, even if it's not on the screen right now, like let me go over here to the cat, and let me say that when the cat is clicked, the cat will move 10 steps, and I'll move Abby back here. I'll go full screen for a moment. So I can click Abby, I can click the cat. It doesn't matter what's showing in the coding window at the time. These pieces are all live. So always take note, especially when you're doing when a certain key is pressed. It's possible to attempt to do the same key for two sprites and not realize you're doing it. So it's very easy to move sprites. So go ahead and experiment. There's so many things we can do with this. For our first coding challenge, let's make a sprite move, either up or down or left or right, when one of those arrow keys is pressed. What we're going to do is we're going to look for the coding, the motion coding that says when a key is pressed, change either the X or the Y by so many increments. Ultimately, it's going to look like this. When the left arrow key is pressed, change the X by -50. And if the right arrow is pressed, we'll go +50. When the up arrow, now we're looking at the Y-axis, is pressed to go up, it'll be +50, and it'll be -50 when we want the sprite to go down. Let me show you a couple coding tricks about how you can do this very quickly. And while I do that, let's also take a look at animating a sprite using these advanced coding blocks. Let's say to move the sprite, as far as location, to wherever the mouse pointer is at the time, or move to go and talk to another sprite. So let's see how this looks. I already dragged out some coding blocks. I dragged out the event when left arrow key is pressed. Change the X. Now remember, X is left and right. It's the horizontal axis, and minus 50 goes to the left. I need one to say when right arrow, go positive 50. So let me come over here. If I right click over it, it says duplicate. Now the first time you go to duplicate, it's going to grab only the single block. The second time I could grab all of it. I can right click over this and say delete. Okay, so here we go. This time, instead of dragging all that over, I can say, just change this to right arrow. Instead of minus 50, change this to positive 50. Now let me go over here. When up arrow, change the Y, that's the vertical axis, by positive 50. Let me duplicate this. Let me duplicate the whole thing. There we go. Oops. Okay, that's a mistake there, so let me say delete. Let me go over this one, duplicate. Okay, that's better. Get rid of this extra. I'm going to change this to minus 50, which is down in the vertical way, so I'll say down arrow. Now let's take a look. What I like with this change by, doesn't matter where the cat is, right, left, up, down. Every time I press one of these arrow keys, the cat moves in that direction. Now, let's add another thing here. Let me go in and say, and I'm going to take when a certain key is pressed, and I'm going to choose the key as being C for cat. And let me go grab a motion. So let me say go to, and if I take this go to, it gives me a whole bunch of choices. First of all is random position. So as I type C over the cat, it's just going all over the place, completely random. Let me go in and say, when the C is pressed, go to the mouse pointer. I'll go put the mouse pointer up there somewhere. Now instead of go to, I'll do it one more time. That's kind of cool. Now instead of saying this, I could have said glide. And then I could see it like over 2 seconds or so, see the cat move around more. One last item, let me say go to the other sprite. In this case, there's only one, and that's Abby. So if I type the letter C, the cat goes to see Abby. But all these things are still live, so I can still move my arrow keys, and I can go to the full screen, and I can do all of these things as well. There's my letter C, there's my left, right, and up, down arrow. Now let me go back to here and show one other quick thing. You notice this is like a canvas, and I can just move these blocks anywhere that I want to. But sometimes they get a little confusing, and it gets jumbled up over here and too crowded or disorganized. Where I see the upper right-hand part of the coding window, if I right-click over there, there's my undo. And it says I can delete all these blocks if I want to. Add comments. And comment, by the way, the comment I would probably put like right in this area. Add a comment. I would say something like, in this case, cat will move left. Now, this is a very small block of coding. I probably don't really need that comment. But let's say that down the road, like very quickly, we're going to have a whole bunch of this, going to be very populated. We're going to have big blocks of code. And then you might forget what this is all about. So putting a little comment here could save you time. I'm just going to delete this one because this one's pretty self-evident. One last thing up here, when I right-click over the cat in this area, it says that I can clean up the blocks. Now that's nice because now they're all organized. They're all spaced out properly. A little cleanup after you're finished working with the coding. Let's experiment briefly with one more thing to do with sprites. Let's change the looks of a sprite. So by looks, in this case, we're not talking about the appearance of the clothing and so on, but rather the character or the sprite can say something or think something. So we can type in whatever we want the character to say or whatever we want the character to think, and we can specify a number of seconds. And our last piece for today, how do you save your work? Well, again, keep in mind you can join the site and you can save in the cloud, but to share with someone else, like with me, for example, you want to save it, then you want to be able to upload it to Blackboard ultimately. You can save and load by going to File, and it'll say File New, File Load, or File Save. So let's see how we can do all of that. So for our last piece, let's take a look at what this looks like when I click onto the Looks area. So I've clicked on Abby in my case, on Looks, and I'm going to say something, and I'm also going to say think something. Notice you could just say it and think it, or say it for so many seconds, or think it for so many seconds. So right now, instead of adding an event, I'm just going to click. Oh, there Abby is saying hello for 2 seconds, and it's going away. And here, Abby is thinking it. Notice the little bubbles, and it looks like she's like a comic strip character thinking. And here's the say. Now, if I want to change what she's saying or thinking, I can click in here and simply type it. I'll say, this is cool. So I can just simply click on it to test it out, and sure enough, there it is. And keep in mind, with any of these things, you can always add an event. So in this case, I'll say when Abby is clicked, let her think this. And to make it dramatic, I'll go up to the full screen. 2 seconds, this is cool. Okay, the final step today is how do you save this stuff? Well, up here in the menu, you'll notice File. So I can say File Load and File New to start a new one and load something that I've saved. And here it just says File Save. So it's just like a regular piece of software. And look at that on the bottom. Here it is. It's already saved for me. So if I ask you to create something and upload it to Blackboard, say File Save, and you know that it's, unless you tell differently, I'm going to right click and say Show in a Folder, it's in my Downloads area. So I can simply take that and take it out of Downloads, move it somewhere where I know, or I can simply take it right from there and read it up to Blackboard. So I hope you find this cool and easy to use. To wrap up today's class, let me introduce you to the tutorials and activities that Scratch already has built into their system. For each of the activities that they list, they present it so a teacher can experiment by trying the coding, following the tutorial. You can download a set of coding cards. So if you're a STEM leader in your school, you can download these codes that give hints and directions. They don't tell the student exactly what to do. And finally, they also create an educator guide to, again, guide a STEM leader, a teacher who is going to lead this process in school. So for our activity, so you can practice this, if you navigate to this site, /ideas, so Scratch and then /ideas, there's all kinds of interesting things you can do, up to the point of doing simple or even complex games even. Just choose one tutorial, create it, save it to your PC, and then upload it to Blackboard. So experiment and have fun with it. And for our next class, we'll start taking a look at intermediate coding with Scratch. Let's look at some of the more involved pieces called operators and variables. Look forward to seeing you at our next online class.